Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, leading publishers of books, directories, educational guides and magazines aimed at schools in the UK and beyond. Enjoy the podcast.
Live from Seville, this is The Twilight Show with Harry Waters, and you are listening live.
Hello, good evening, good night, happy Twilight, I guess, which actually is here. So that's a fun time of year when it is actually twilight during the Twilight Show. I hope everybody is well and enjoying their week thus far. It's been a week without incident for me this week, which is nice. Very chill, not a huge number of meetings, which is always good, which has been a lot of fun for getting down to actual work, or should I say, avoiding actual work at all costs. I decided rather than to spend hours and hours writing, I'd revise some things I'd already done, but also I've spent a lot more time planning my classes this week, which has been exceptional. I've been working with a group in Mexico. We've been talking a lot about board work, so it's great to kind of remind yourself of these very, very simple things you think, but also very important that you kind of just leave behind when you're struggling to do this, that, and the other. So yeah, it's been a fun week with some really super mega productive classes, which has been great. So we've been looking at storytelling in our class with the older students, I guess. So they are 8 and 9. Well, no, they're 9, 10, and 11. So these students, we've been working on putting a story together and telling a story and relating it to an anecdote and trying to get that aspect out amongst our students and have them have the opportunity to speak and share and present whichever way there's a desire. Luckily, this is a fairly outgoing group that we have, so most of them wanted a simple performance at the end of their story. But yeah, the key to it wasn't, of course, the vocabulary that they were using, but the style in which they delivered their story, the way in which they grabbed people's attention. So it was a really fun week with that class. With the other class, I used Sylvina's lesson plan. Well, I took some ideas from it because they're a much lower level, but we did use the song Bad Day by Daniel Powter to talk about daily routines, which is a classic with younger students. So these students are 7 and 8, and they absolutely loved watching the video and trying to reenact the video. And it's been super fun getting them to look at their own days, but also look at the typical day of people in other places that aren't Spain. People were amazed that, these 7 and 8-year-old students were amazed when we talked about people, might have a shower in the morning. And then we talking about times, particularly times of when people eat and go to bed, and their amazement that people could have their evening meal, their dinner, their tea, whatever you prefer to call it. They're amazed that people would have that so early in the UK. So when we mentioned around 6 o'clock, they were just like, what? That can't be true. That's so early. Like, that's when I have my afternoon snack. So they were quite amazed by that. But it was a bit of fun to see, the different ways people got to school and have a look at, the different days that people had rather than just the same day that everybody always has. Get up, go to school. Talking about breakfast as well is quite an interesting one with students, because they always ask, which breakfast? Do we mean the second breakfast at school, or do we mean the first breakfast straight away, first thing in the morning when they get up? And it always amazes me that the students' breakfast often is, a biscuit or a cup of milk, and that's it. And then they go to school for 3 or 4 hours before it's their playtime. and then they go outside and they have their main breakfast, which again is often just a biscuit or something like that. So looking at those healthy habits is a really important issue that we're trying to deal with at the moment, particularly at my daughter's school, and looking at healthy eating habits. And tomorrow starts the free fruit, where they go around and they give them an orange, or I think strawberries are on the menu tomorrow. So all students have to bring is a reusable, refillable holding device, so a Tupperware or something like that. So today we are going to talk all about mediation. What is mediation, I hear you say? We'll talk more about it very shortly, but it's about getting one idea from one person to another, basically. We will be back very soon with more on that, with our special guest today, two award-winning authors who are absolutely fantastic, but we'll talk more about them very shortly.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Cambrian News reports on Sport Wales' survey of school sport and its findings from 2022. The results showed that 39% of pupils took part in organised sport outside of the curriculum, a decrease of 9% since 2018. With a further 36% of pupils reporting no frequent participation in an organised sport outside of the curriculum, an increase of 8%, making the nation less active than in 2018. The report also highlights issues with schools having appropriate equipment to make sport provision more inclusive, as well as concerns around a growing wealth divide. There is a 15% difference in participation in organised sport outside of the curriculum between the least and most deprived areas. The gap has increased since 2018. Football remains the most popular sport participated in at a community setting. In schools, there has also been a decline in the number of minutes of curriculum PE per week, with primary schools providing an average of 93 minutes, down from 99 minutes in 2018, and secondary schools providing around 93 minutes, down from 95 in 2018. The decrease in wider participation is attributed to the pandemic, but funding, adequate training, and reliance on volunteers also has an impact. Full details of the survey can be found on the Sport Wales website. The impact a teacher can have on the lives of students has been a topic across radio and television media outlets after the Princess of Wales was pictured hugging her former history teacher. The pair met up after a 25-year gap during a visit to the National Maritime Museum in Cornwall, with the princess reportedly telling her old teacher, "The things you taught me, I now teach to my children." Former teacher Mr. Embry described the princess as exuberant and just like she was. He also referred to her as conscientious and considerate while she was a student. The pleasure at seeing her former teacher and the time spent chatting were captured in many photographs and resulted in plenty of further discussion on teachers who were remembered fondly for playing a role in the lives of their pupils. Strikes, teacher pay and conditions and previous comments made by Education Secretary Gillian Keegan continue to dominate the news. ITV News reports that Ms Keegan has defended her claim that teachers are among the best off financially, when you consider the whole package. She told ITV News that benefits outside of the basic salary made it hard to compare their jobs with those in the private sector. In the interview, Ms Keegan made comments about possible plans to toughen up the law to force teachers to inform school leaders if they plan to strike, and insisted that she would not budge from her position of rejecting above-inflation pay rises. Ms Keegan also talked of plans to change the University Application System UCAS to include apprenticeships alongside traditional degrees and to promote different career paths. The interview was part of a 2-day visit to the North West, with ITV having exclusive access to Ms Keegan. Full details of the story and more of the Education Secretary's views on strikes, pay and the views she has on education can be found on the ITV News website. The United Nations appears to have weighed into the debate on religious schools in Ireland. On the National Secular Society website, the group suggests that the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, UNCRC, has urged the Republic of Ireland to guarantee the right of all children to practice freely their religion or belief, by no longer allowing exemptions to ensure a child's right to education on religious or ethos grounds. Most primary schools in Ireland are run by churches, and 90% are Catholic schools. Over half of secondary schools are linked to a particular religious denomination, although there are 150 multi-denominational schools in the country. The UNCRC also called on Ireland to strengthen measures to eliminate discrimination against LGBTQ children, as well as children of minority faith or non-faith backgrounds. The issue has raised its head again after reports by the Irish Department for Education were submitted to the UNCRC to highlight progress following previous recommendations. Finally, BBC News features a long-read article about the BAFTA-nominated film Blue Jean and the lesbian teachers who inspired it. The plot follows a lesbian PE teacher in the late 1980s, at a time when a controversial law banned the promotion of homosexuality via Section 28. The legislation was in force until 2000 in Scotland and 2003 in England and Wales. The film was released on the 10th of February. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
This is 2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Hello, this week I'm taking a look at the AI-powered all-new Microsoft Bing search. Are we soon to be saying Bing it instead of Google it? There's only one way to decide. Let's have a search engine scrap. First, to use Bing, it's recommended you have the Edge browser installed. However, you can just go to bing.com. To get the full experience, I'm signing into my Microsoft account on bing.com in the Edge browser and signing into my Google account on google.co.uk in Chrome. Putting both interfaces side by side, they look the same, only Google has no distractions. Today that is, as sometimes there's a Google Doodle to celebrate something. Bing has a block of top news stories, and you can scroll down to see more headlines and ads. This, I feel, is a negative for Bing, as it's really easy to be distracted. Click something that catches your eye, and searching turns to procrastinating. Other slight differences are Bing's search results when clicked open in a new tab, Google's don't. This is not a problem on your computer, but tabs are different on your phone, and it could be a little annoying having to close them if you're doing an extensive search. On the flip side, it could be useful if comparing prices, etc. The decision is for you to make. I know what you're thinking. Test the AI, Steve. Okay, I'm on it. As Bing now wants to chat with me, I type, I'm having a barbecue for 5 people. What should I cook? In Google, I simply type barbecue 5 people. The results differ. Bing gives me 165 million results, top being planning a large barbecue cookout for a crowd. It was a decent read and ranged from cooking for 60 to 100 people to 5 to 6. I'm now quite hungry. Google gave me a string of barbecues to buy, adverts, and then the first result was on the barbecue calculator. This was right up my geek street, and I think Google won this round. You put the number of people in, and then put the number of kids in, and select some other options, and it tells you what you need to buy to have a barbecue for that many people. Genius. Omni was third down in the Bing search. Only very slightly is Google winning at the moment. I like that Bing didn't hit me with ads straight away. I thought Google's suggested searches, the people also asked bit, was neater and easier to scan than Bing's. Bing's was a bit wordy. With Google slightly in the lead, let's do my last test. I'm going to introduce some vegans. Now on my search in Bing, I type, I'm having a barbecue for 5 people, 2 are vegan, what should I cook? In Google, I simply type barbecue, 5 people, 2 vegan. Bing brings me 176 million results and Google a mere 109 million. Both show pretty much exact results, apart from the advertising from Google. Same top sites and no sign of meat anywhere. I'm inundated with vegan recipes for barbecue. Scrolling down, AI wins. The 6th result on Bing is 20 tips for hosting a vegan guest to dinner. By the time I get to page 4 of Google's results, I've given up. To draw a conclusion, it's down to personal preference. Bing uses the same search algorithms and the AI is new, so it's still learning. The question is really, what will it be like in the future when it's had time to learn more? Don't forget to tell us what you would do if a vegan was coming to your barbecue. Get in touch at TT Radio Official. I'm Steve Woods, and that was 2 Minute Tech.
2 Minute Tech with Steve Woods, your tech briefing on Teachers Talk Radio.
Thank you very much, Steve and Joe. So we are back and we're going to go to our interview now with Ethan Mansour, an award-winning, as I mentioned before, teacher trainer, and of course author. And for this book, his partner in crime, not for everything, obviously, Riccardo Chiappini, who again is also an award-winning, of course, author. He's a teacher trainer, and they are both genuinely all-round lovely folk. So let's head over to that interview. If you do have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll do my best to answer them. Otherwise, I'll get on to the gents to get back to you. Here we go. So a very warm welcome to my guests today, Ethan and Riccardo. Hello there, gents.
Hi there. Thank you very much for inviting us over.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for being here. It's my pleasure entirely. So before we begin on our journey into mediation, I would like to just quickly ask you if you could tell me about your journey in ELT. So where did it begin and where are you now? So I'm going to throw this out to either one of you, but I'm going to say Riccardo just because I'm looking at you.
Because you said Ethan and Riccardo. Okay, well, then the Riccardo first. Okay. Hi there. My name's Riccardo. I was born in Italy, where I started teaching English in 2009. What did I do next? So I started in this very small school. I was actually working more as a translator back then, but I really liked teaching, so I thought I might need a little bit more training, and that's when I decided to move here to Madrid, in Spain, where I did my CELTA at International House Madrid. And lucky enough, I was also asked to join the other international house teachers, and work with them. Then after that, well, I think it's the usual ITA. I did my Delta, started hating books, but then, of course, when I was kind of, professionally young back then. But then I met Ethan, and that's when it all began. It all started with mediation, and so it was quite an easy step into materials writing. And now it's basically what I've been doing over the past 2.5 years, writing materials for publishers, big and small, and doing quite a lot for teacher training. Not only remediation, fortunately, but again, I really love it.
I love that phrase. And then I started hating books. I think that's
yeah,
a moment most teachers have, don't they?
Yeah, I think any good teacher goes through the stage where you start hating books.
Yeah, hopefully not any of the books that we've written, though.
Exactly. But then, you go back to that and then, oh no, well, let me rephrase that or rethink.
We've moved from hating books to writing them. So
yeah.
So they're unhateable now. That's the thing, because you've written them, obviously. Thank you very much, Riccardo. How about you, Ethan? What is your journey?
Yeah, so I think I kind of had that typical TEFL teacher journey where I sort of graduated from university, didn't quite know what to do. And so I moved to Spain and started teaching English there, and decided that I really like teaching, that it's a nice thing to do. And yeah, so I lived in Spain for a while, and then I moved to Italy, and then I moved back to Spain. And that's when I started working for International House in Madrid, and that's where I met Riccardo. And yeah, I think that was a good place for me to sort of grow professionally. It was the first place where I did any sort of teacher training, and then Riccardo and I started sort of publishing things together, and yeah, sort of one thing led to another, and yeah, I still teaching, but definitely spending most of my time doing materials writing at this point, and a little bit of teacher training sort of related to the materials that I write, basically. I don't really think of myself as a teacher trainer necessarily, but I do like conferences and stuff, the same stuff you do, Harry.
Yeah, it is a kind of fun journey, isn't it, where I think I probably love teaching more now than I ever have, because it isn't the 9 to 5 thing that it was before. I know that when you're teaching, like, either in an academy or in a school, and it's 5 to 8 hours every day of teaching, it can absolutely destroy you, and you can lose some of that passion. But as it has slowly reduced for me, I'd say I'm now probably about 28% teacher. This is going to become confusing now.
No, but I do agree.
Good luck with the maths.
Yeah.
I do agree with you on that. It's generally like when things become complementary and not mandatory in a sort of way, they do they become more fascinating in a sort of way. So I can do that, yeah. And then, but I can do a little bit of this too, and I can do a little bit of that. So it's a bit of I think it's the our job. Like if you're self-employed and like us, you need a little bit of everything, like writing, training, editing, and so on. So that's I actually like it.
And it really helps with the other aspects. I think they're also complementary, like the writing, the training, and the teaching. I'm not sure I'd be able to do any one of them individually without doing the others as well, if you know what I mean. They very much complement each other.
Yeah,
definitely sort of feed off each other.
So I've known you both now. I've known of you both internetly, probably for maybe 2 years or so. I don't really know about time anymore. Since COVID, everything's just been warped. It's obviously there's BC, which is before COVID, and AC after COVID. So I've known you both, I think probably from around the start of COVID, when everything basically went online, and suddenly it was like, oh, there are these people, they're doing this, and this whole internet community happened. But I didn't get to meet both of you, or either of you, until earlier this year, when I met you both separately and then together. So I first met Ethan in Barcelona. Was that the first time we met in Barcelona at Innovate? Was that our first meeting, or was that our second?
No, I think we met at IATEFL, actually.
We did. We met in Belfast first. But again, it was all so brief, it felt. But then I met both of you together. So I never really knew if it was like a Superman Clark Kent kind of thing, if really you did both exist, or maybe one of you was just masquerading as both people. So there was never any evidence for it for me, because I'd never seen you both in the same room at the same time until this year, until a couple of weeks back when we met in London at the profession's perhaps most glamorous event, we could say. Some people call it the Oscars of ELT, whereas I'm not sure entirely, but I'm not sure how comfortable I am with that. But we met at the Eltons, which is a rather large awards ceremony in our profession, within our industry. And so what were you guys doing there?
I'm going to let Ethan on to that. What were we doing?
We wrote a book that was very surprisingly nominated. We were finalists in the category of innovation and teacher resources. And to our surprise, we actually won, which was very exciting. It's sort of I wouldn't say it was our first book. It was our first book together, for sure.
Yeah.
It was one of the first things we started working on. To even be nominated was a huge deal for us, to actually win was crazy.
It was surprising.
But you were also nominated here. You were finalist as well.
I was a finalist.
So we were all there. We were all sitting in the same sort of area because we were all finalists. So we got to sit together. That was fun.
It was so good, like that moment where you say it was surprising. I didn't know your category very well. I'd kind of glanced over it and I'd watched the videos and stuff, but like after I'd seen the videos, I thought they're definitely in with a pretty strong chance. Like they're in with a pretty strong chance. And that moment when they started to announce the winner, Ethan's reaction was just priceless. Like the head went into the hands, it was a full fold over. It was amazing. He was there. I gave him a massive hug, and then you gave Ricardo a hug, and it was just this moment of pure joy. It was such an amazing moment to be there. I'm so glad that I got to sit with you for that moment, to be able to share in that moment of joy, because it was just It was brilliant. It was so good. So, you know, the award winners, congratulations on that. But the whole event, it was, I mean, I know we've mentioned this briefly before. It was a bit surreal, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was. We really didn't know what we were doing there because we talked about it. Ethan was very, very nervous the day before he told me. And why are you? But at the same time, I was like, yeah, it's the first time for us. We don't really know the. I mean, we have been in this world for about over 10 years now. But we're quite surprised. Like it was new, very new to us. It still is, of course, and it still kind of feels strange. We both believe that our book is quite it's true, it's quite innovative, but at the same time, there was other projects and books within our category, so we kind of we can't win this. It's like it's good that we're here, but
yeah, I was convinced we weren't going to win. There were some good books in our category. I mean, I haven't actually read them, I have to say, but from the titles and what little I do know about them, there seemed like there was some good books in our category. So again, I'm still surprised we won, to be honest, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy one. It was definitely like as you said, it was an amazing moment. Like I feel like it's like probably the peak of my of my career at LT. I've already reached the peak.
So far. There can be more peaks.
I can just retire to the countryside and sort of grow vegetables at this point or something,
All around the award, vegetables growing.
Put the award in the middle of the garden. No, I feel like it definitely gave at least me like an enormous feeling of satisfaction. But we worked very hard on that book. I have to say, we spent so long writing that book without any kind of hope of making money or anything. We were just happy to be writing it. Happy to have that opportunity, and to get that kind of recognition was it's really cool.
We worked hard, but it came up pretty naturally. It was everything. I think since the beginning, it was like it started as a WhatsApp conversation, I think, and then it materialized into a book after 12 months. I think
it became an award. It started as a WhatsApp conversation. It became an award. It really felt to me like so when I got there and was doing the awkward standing around thing, it just felt like the coffee breaks at a conference. That's exactly how it felt to me, like upstairs. It just felt like it was just a giant coffee break at a conference and people looked a bit nicer than usual. It's just a bit like, this is really weird.
Yeah, people really dressed up. Some people really dressed up. There was a sort of a different approaches to the Althans, I think. But some people they were really dressed up.
Hey, I had a suit on and everything.
Yeah, you were wearing a suit, for example. I've never seen that before.
Not many people have.
How did it feel for you, Harry, to be a finalist? It must have been.
It was good. It was really
honor.
good.
Being a finalist is a really big deal, obviously. So.
Yeah, it was kind of it was. I was happy to be nominated as a finalist, but also it was on a project that, yes, I was very much involved in. But there was it was very much for a big publisher, and it didn't feel quite the same, I imagine, as it might have had it been with Renewable English or had it been with a book that I had written and it had my name on the front cover of the book. It felt a bit like, although I had done 97% of the work for it, it felt a bit like...
Yeah, I was going to say, when you Google Speak Out for Sustainability, listeners, all you see is Harry's face. So obviously very much involved in that project.
Yeah, so it was... I was very happy to be there and to get the commendation was great and it was really lovely. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about you. Well, actually, no, we're not even here to talk about you. We're here to talk about your area of expertise. And it is something that I'm going to refer back to 2019 when I was an ELT consultant, not a book salesman, an ELT consultant. And I was going around a lot of escuelas oficiales de idiomas, which here in Spain are like schools for adults, basically, more or less.
Yeah, they're run by the government. It's like a sort of state funded
language schools
around the country. There are a lot of them. It's sort of surprising how many there are. Actually.
There are loads. In fact, I'm doing live classes with them at this not this moment, but I did one last night, and there are 15 classes. There are 15 different EOIs in each one, and there's so many. I didn't realize quite how big it was until I was in Catalonia, and I was going on to all these different EOIs, and every single one of them was saying to me, but mediation, what is it? How do I do it? What am I supposed to do? I don't even know what this is. And suddenly we have to examine it, and I don't even know how to teach it. I don't even know what it is. So suddenly the EOIs were given this thing. It seemed like the policymakers had looked at the Common European Framework of Reference and gone, okay, mediation, that's new, that's in there. So now you have to teach it. And they were given that, and publishers scrambled to get bits and bobs together, to get a few activities together. But that was literally it. It was like, you have to teach mediation, now teach it. So I was going into these EOIs, and they were like, hey, you work for a publisher, how do I teach mediation? I was just like, well, obviously you I don't know. So I had no idea. I know a bit more now. But I'm going to hand over to you. What is mediation in ELT?
Ricardo, you want to take the lead on it?
Yeah. Well, mediation is pretty much there are 3 different types of mediation. Let's say that mediation has always been in the Common European Framework of Reference. When it came out in 2001, it was already there. Then over the past few years, and then when the updates came out, the CFR came out in 2018, if I remember correctly, and they did a sort of second re-edition in 2020. Mediation was expanded by the authors, like they described every single aspect of mediation, the 3 different modes, or better, sorry, the 3 different flavors of mediation. So I think the best way to put it would be like, let's say that mediation is a set of language activities which can be broken down into 3 strands: mediating text, mediating communication, and mediating concepts. To summarize, instead of going deeper into the 3 flavors, just in general, you could say mediation is a very common language activity where someone helps someone else understand something. There's something doesn't always have to be like I don't know, an aseptic sorts of source information. It can also be creative texts, like you can just respond in a personal way to a creative text, or you analyze and criticize a creative text. So generally what people think about when they hear mediating text is like, okay, you have a source text, you read it, to summarize it to someone else, and that's it. But there are different types of mediating text. There are actually 7 in the CFR, and what's interesting about mediating texts is the very word text. Text could be anything. It could be spoken texts, could be written texts, but it can also be visual or multimodal texts. I don't know, visual like graphs or charts or infographics. Well, that's a multimodal text or infographic, but also a film and so on. So basically, there's I think it's very important. Mediation is very important because it helps students think about there's this concept of otherness. Like, you have to think about who you're talking to, who you're relaying information to, in order to make this information more accessible to them.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a key part of mediation, sort of thinking about the other person's communicative needs. So it's it's like a move away from just trying to communicate something yourself to trying to help someone else sort of understand something. Just sort of it's a small sort of tweak, but actually has interesting sort of consequences. You know, you sort of you have to use a lot of sort of critical thinking or emotional intelligence to sort of try to understand what someone else needs in
Correct.
order to understand something.
Correct. And this information can come from a text, or it could be just between two people, helping two people understand each other, or even in group work, and there would be leading concepts.
I think for me,
Yeah.
like the thing that really forced it home for me, like understanding what it was. When I can't remember who was explaining it to me, I think it may have been Michael Brand was explaining it to me, and he said, just think about, and you even mention it in your book as well, when like a relative comes over and you go out to eat and there's the menu there, and they don't understand the menu, and you have to. Now, you don't translate the menu to them. You don't just go there and translate, because you know the kind of things they like, so if you've gone to a restaurant, let's say an Indian restaurant, and you know they don't like really spicy food, then you're not going to go through and translate the really spicy things. You're going to look for the things that they might like, and you'll even find out that information from them. You'll say, hey, what kind of food do you like? Do you like spicy food? You'll understand. So that was a really big thing for me in understanding mediation.
Correct.
Was that whole the other party? It isn't simply going in there and translating what's there, because at first I was like,
it's not about it's not about you, it's about the other person,
Correct.
Which I think it's an interesting sort of way of approaching communicative language activities when you think about it. So getting students to sort of stop thinking about what they want to communicate and their own ideas and opinions, and start thinking about sort of what somebody else would want to know about something, what someone else would need to understand about something. It ends up being an interesting thing to explore, I think.
Yeah, there's lots of critical thinking too. Like, you have to think about what the other person might need or needs, and you cater for their needs. Everything needs to fit the communicative situation, but it's all about. I remember this comment from Ethan. It's like, yeah, this is a good point. It's all about the other. It's all about the other person. It's all about the target audience.
And Ricardo mentioned helping people understand something, but this sort of general idea of sort of helping somebody. So you could sort of be helping other people communicate better, sort of maybe sorting out some type of disagreement or misunderstanding. But you could also sort of be helping people work better together, making like sort of, if you're doing some group work, for example, mediation could involve sort of helping the group sort of decide what to do and make sure one person isn't dominating, sort of improving the communication within a group, or
managing
that also
the
sort of falls into this category of mediation. As you can see, like a mediation activity is sort of not one thing, it's sort of a whole category of things. The same way that writing isn't sort of one thing. You can sort of write a whole lot of things. Mediation is the same way. It's sort of, but it has this sort of these core principles that sort of at its heart of thinking about the other person, facilitating understanding interaction or cooperation.
Because my immediate reaction when I heard mediation was in an argument, in a debate. Like that was the only thing I could think of when someone said mediation. I was like, well, that means two people are fighting over something and you have to mediate that. Like that was like, it took a while, as I say, to kind of get it into my thick head that wasn't what mediation was. Like there was a whole lot more to it.
It's not your thick head. I think the name itself is sort of misleading. I think that's possibly one of the problems of why people think mediation is sort of hard or something. Because I think if they had a different name for it, it might have been.
I think it's not.
But in fact, it does actually include the type of mediation you're talking about, sort of helping people resolve disagreements and stuff. So that's kind of in there. So it's just that they've kind of expanded the concept of mediation sort of within second language learning and teaching. Sorry, Ricardo, I cut you off.
Oh no! I actually think it was a very good choice on behalf of the author and body of the CFR. Like, because most people think of mediation as conflict resolution and everything, but that's exactly what mediation is. Even if it's text or concepts, you are managing communication. You are managing. Sometimes it's two people who might agree or disagree, who might be of different cultural backgrounds or not. They might know about the topic or not, or it's between members in a group. So in the end, it's managing happens as
managing
three
meanings and
categories.
ideas.
I think it was as not. Yeah, I agree that it's like kind of misleading, but I think it's more about the format more than the core meaning of mediation, because you're always managing, right? And I think that they must have thought really hard on this. Well, how are we going to call it? Shall we just leave it, mediation, or are we going to call it a different way? I think it's a very, it was a smart choice, probably just to I don't know, maybe to keep that sort of idea that already is in inside all of us. Our mediation is like two people, and have to manage help them communicate with each other. Yeah, this flow, keeping this flow go, maybe. I don't know.
Going back to what you said before, Harry, about the menu, sort of translating or sort of interpreting a menu for somebody. I think that's kind of the mediation people are most familiar with, at least in Spain, because that's kind of the mediation that they put on exams. And there's sort of been this whole top-down thing that's happened in Spain, starting with the Escuelas Oficiales de Idiomas, and now it's actually being incorporated in sort of primary and secondary schools as well. But yeah, it's been like a very sort of top-down thing in Spain. And I think that was a bit traumatic for teachers who didn't have a lot of resources and didn't necessarily understand what they were supposed to be teaching. But I think it's very interesting, actually, because for Ricardo and I, it was like very bottom up. Like we just kind of came across it and were fascinated by it and started sort of trying it out with our students and thought it was great. So I think we've kind of met in the middle. In terms of, because like publishers were also coming from this place of like, all these teachers are asking us for mediation stuff, we don't know how to make it yet. And whereas Ricardo and I are sort of coming from the completely opposite direction, we were sort of, just kind of on the ground in our classes, trying stuff out. And that kind of led us into, creating mediation materials for publishers and stuff. So yeah, we sort of came across it in a different way than most other teachers did.
I think when I've seen it and looked at various materials and read various like descriptors of it, a lot of things you sort of stop and think, I already do that in my classroom. And I think a lot of teachers have realized that a lot of it they already do, but they didn't know how to assess it. So stuff like summarizing and paraphrasing, they're things that you absolutely need to do. Like if you're learning another language, or you have that activity where it is, read a text and tell your partner about the text. But there was no knowledge that was mediation. That was just me reading a text and summarizing. And suddenly, people are realizing, oh, maybe I do know how to do this because I've been doing it for the last 20 something years, but I didn't realize. And I think that one of the biggest issues, because it came in suddenly in a top-down way, was the assessment side of things. Like, how am I supposed to assess if my students are mediating or not if I don't know what mediation is? I mean, if they then find out what mediation is, it makes assessment a lot easier. But yeah, how would you go about assessing a mediation activity?
Okay, if I just to go back to what you said about, I already do this exactly. Yeah, that most of the activities that we propose in our book, or mediation activities in general, it is about. They are activities that all teachers already do. The most important thing is the fact that just by using mediation activities, students will only have the opportunity to, as you said, really focus on summarizing and paraphrasing, etc. But not only because you're giving them the task, okay, I have to summarize here because it says that I have to be concise and everything. No, it's just about giving them a real situation. So they have to, in a sort of way, they understand why they have to summarize or paraphrase or expand. Oh yeah, the target audience doesn't know this. Oh, then I'll have to probably first. Well, but yeah, I think it's there needs to be more research on when it comes to assessment. Simply because of it's like, how do you assess collaboration? How do you assess
group work,
yeah,
more complicated activities. Yeah, yeah, it's
but
not
there are.
necessarily easy. Obviously, when you're integrating skills and having students work together and stuff, it definitely makes assessing a little bit more difficult. However, in the book and sort of other places, Ricardo and I have talked a lot about kind of formative assessment type of things you can do to assess mediation. So, for example, you can kind of have like a stage after the activity where they kind of reflect on what they've done. You can give them some questions, think about like, what were some of the challenges? How did you overcome them? Or like, did you really explain, were you really able to explain, everything that you needed to explain? Or do you think you sort of, do you think you did a good job of selecting important information? Sort of getting students to kind of reflect on, what are sort of the aims of that particular mediation activity, I think could be a good way of assessing it in an informative way, in the sense of sort of helping students get better at doing it in class. Obviously, there's a specific type of mediation that's being tested on exams throughout Spain in these escuelas oficiales de idiomas, as well as other countries too. There, sort of in Greece and other places, which essentially consists of sort of reading something, possibly also listening or watching something, but usually reading something and then having to write about what you've read or talk about what you've read. There are sort of scales that have been developed and stuff for that type of integrated task. I mean, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to assess, but I don't think it's the hardest either.
No,
I
it's
think
true.
it's just sort of new-ish, and so possibly that's where the difficulty lies. Just because when you think of it, people have been trying to assess speaking and writing and reading and stuff for a very long time. However, sort of integrating skills and stuff on exams is, people haven't done it as much because it is a little bit hard to assess. So there's a little bit sort of less research that's been done on that type of assessing that type of activity in sort of what's the opposite of formative assessment? Summative assessment.
There you go.
In a some way, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember when I did my Spanish, may have been the B2 or the C1, I can't remember. When I did one of the exams, but it was, you have to listen to an advert and then you have to do a writing based on the advert.
Yes. Yeah. So the Instituto Cervantes they've been assessing this type of task for a very long time, actually, and I think they've done a pretty decent job, actually. Yeah. So it's not that like what you're describing as a mediation task, people didn't call it mediation, but on that exam that you took called the DELE, they've had this type of task for years and years. So it's not that it's sort of new or something. In fact, on the TOEFL exam, there's integrated skills tests where you have to sort of watch a video of a teacher talking and then sort of write something about it and stuff. So it's not that those kind of things didn't appear on exams before. However, there's just a bigger focus on it now, and now that we have sort of a very sort of granular description of mediation in CFR, those descriptors sort of help focus on the strategies that Ricardo was mentioning earlier, which I think has sort of been left out of other assessment for existing exams and stuff.
And that is the most important thing, like the fact that we shouldn't, as with other skills, it's not about, or better, not only about language, but it's about, like, as we have come to call it now, for obvious reasons, but task achievement, like, they passed on the message, and then, with like how well do they do it, the communication strategies that they use them, how, and then when it comes to, well, of course, appropriacy, appropriacy, if the text is appropriate to the communicative situations, if the case is for the target audience needs. And when it comes to accuracy, I was given this training course. People were like, no, well, it can't be. So accuracy shouldn't be like first thing you have to think about is accuracy of the information that has been relayed by the mediator, not if the language is accurate. It's not about grammar and vocabulary right now. Think about, is it accurate? Did they, I don't know, if the source text says, 100 miles, and the target text has to be, I don't know, in a different unit of measure, I don't know, yards or meters. So is it exactly like, is it accurate to say like, is it 100 meters? Possibly not. I mean, probably it's not the best example ever, but still, in terms of numbers, or
I think we're getting sort of way into the weeds for this. I think but I think in general, I think kind of it's back to what we were saying before, like how well did you help the person, essentially?
Yeah.
Like if you're helping somebody by explaining something that's in a text, like how well have you communicated it, basically, and as Carl said, like have you actually passed on the information correctly, and have you sort of paraphrased, have you summarized it effectively? Like I think those are sort of the main things to focus on when you're assessing mediation on an exam.
I think for
Or
me,
in
one
class,
of the one of the keys for me there, what Ricardo said a short while back, was all about. So yes, we've done these activities for years and years and years, but that whole the putting the why to it. So why are students summarizing? Why are they doing this? That's the way of focusing it to being mediation and not just being another task. Because yes, they were doing mediation before, but there wasn't that reason behind it. They didn't know why they were mediating. They didn't know why they were summarizing.
Exactly.
It didn't have any kind of reasoning. So students wouldn't really give a damn. And now when you're saying, okay, mediation is part of what we're assessing you on, suddenly they're like, oh, now I do want to learn about this. This is brilliant.
Well, one thing we like about me is sort of like moves from just simple communication to like action. Like you're trying to accomplish something, like you're not just sort of summarizing to summarize. You're like summarizing for a person so they can understand it better. It's sort of, it makes that kind of activity more meaningful, more interesting, hopefully.
Now, this is the whole approach we're taking now, right? That's in language teaching in general, linearity, like the goal-oriented approach. Transform it into energy, into action, right? Yeah.
So in a moment, I want to talk about a couple of the activities that are in the book. But before that, now there's this endless debate in ELT that I don't understand it, with people's English only classroom and so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into that now because I won't stop. I think it's absolutely absurd that we should have English only classrooms. I don't think it's necessary. But particularly when it comes to mediation, especially if you're in a monolingual classroom, it's vital to have the L1. I think in any class, it's vital to have the L1, to have that kind of the cultural relation to it and so on and so forth. But I've picked out a short bit of a paragraph from your book that I'm going to read that really resonated with me. And it says here, now I'm not sure which one of you wrote this, so whoever did, well done.
Or if we still agree, agree on with what we were.
So what it says here is, when you think about it, the use of L1 in class opens the door to exciting possibilities of exploiting countless real-life situations involving cross-linguistic mediation that have so far been overlooked in the communicative language classroom. And I just think that that whole thing that you're saying, if you're taking a student's L1 out of the classroom, you're removing real life from them. Suddenly, everything has become, I'm learning English to maybe go and study somewhere, or I'm learning English to maybe go and do this, or I'm learning English to get an exam. And it's not real. Like, why would you want to learn something that isn't real? It has to have that connection to their real life. And I think this is somewhere where mediation is a vital link in that you have the reason to bring L1 into the classroom. And also, particularly in Spain,
a good justification for it, for sure.
Exactly. And particularly here in Spain, people get very nervous with their accuracy and this, that, and the other, their grammatical accuracy, and having them able and making it essential that they go back to their own language and not just translate it, but get the point across to the other person. I think it's super important. And another short sentence I'm going to put in here: the opportunity to share aspects. This is more for multilingual classrooms. The opportunity to share aspects of their plurilingual identity that might never come to service in strictly English-only context. So these two things for me seem to be key to mediation. Would you like to expand on that?
Absolutely. I think it's with everything in general. Like in Latin, they say in aura mediocritas. So it's like right in the middle. It doesn't have to be too much L1, or it doesn't have to be too little either. So I think that everything has a place in the LT classroom. I think it's quite important to include it. Maybe I wouldn't say to use the L1 as much as you want or as much as the teacher wants. I remember my English classes in 1998 in Italy, in a small city. It was all in Italian, and the last 10 minutes, there was like questions like, what's the weather like? With this, but I know the teacher would just go with very, what's the weather like? What did you do yesterday? I was like, maybe not, right? Like,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I mean, the idea
we're
is using that one in a principled way, not
correct,
in like
correct.
a lazy way. And it sounds like Ricardo's teacher was also my teacher in the United States. I studied Spanish, and I don't remember her ever speaking Spanish. So that's certainly not what we're proposing in the book. It's just sort of recognizing that English is always going to be sort of side by side or even mixed with their first language, and that those things
Exactly.
exist side by side, or even together forever. You know, it's just that's a fact, right?
Yeah.
That's how your brain works.
And that's the principle of plurilingualism or pluriculturalism. Like, just, you don't have to mix them up together. It's not code mixing just for for fun or just technically. But that's what happens, as you said, in real life. There are moments in which, how do you say that? Or in this language we say it this way, because so there's lots of coming back and forth.
I think one of the
we
things
were sort of talking about like real life, like when you speak another language, like a lot of times you have to sort of move between your first language and the second language, or
Absolutely.
It sort of happens all the time. Like when you start, like we've done like brainstorms with our students, just to get ideas for our book, actually. But also just as a classroom activity, just to get them to kind of maybe recognize sort of how common and how important mediation is in real life. And students can think of a million,
Absolutely.
situations where they've helped someone understand something that was in their first language into English or vice versa. It's something you end up doing with a second language. Like, it's sort of hard to avoid, actually.
Absolutely. We came out with a book. I mean, it's their ideas, our students' ideas.
We actually got some quite a few of the ideas for the activities actually in the book came from our students. But yeah, it's just like one of those things. It's like kind of like an obvious observation, but it's one that's sort of worth making, is that if you're doing something with a second language outside of the classroom all the time, well, why not do it in class?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just to go back to, because I think you introduced it with like that, I don't understand why. I don't know, I can't remember if you mentioned publishers or like teachers in general, but there are publishers who are including mediation tasks so that ask students to produce target texts in their own language, and not only in their own language, but also like producing different types of less orthodox, like less traditional types of text, like read the text and create an infographic based on the information in the text, for example. So things are going. I think that I'm quite positive. I think they're doing a good job. Like even teachers, if publishers do that,
starting to have a good influence on published materials.
I think in terms of L1 in the classroom, what really needs to happen, I don't think it needs to be, no L1 in the classroom. I don't think it needs, and also not the laziness side of things, which, I'm sure we've all been victim of doing in the past. There are times when you just can't anymore, and it's like, bueno, pues esto tenemos que hacer así, ya está. But we've all done it. I think one of the keys, though, is actually having that within training. So when we're doing our CELTA or our Delta or whatever training there is, how to use an L1 effectively, because nobody really knows. There's been no, this is how you use it effectively. Obviously, you don't just translate every single word when you can't really be bothered. That's definitely not what you're supposed to do. And we as professional teachers have definitely never ever done that. But I think that's a real key, that when to use L1, because as a newly trained teacher, if you have a level in that language, then it's too easy to fall into it, and then you become an experienced teacher that's been doing it for years. So like with Ricardo's teacher or with Ethan's teacher of Spanish. So I think that's what really needs to happen, that we need to have a place where we're going to train. So I'm just going to pause for a moment, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a few of the activities in your book, if that's okay.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, a leading publisher of books, directories, educational guides and magazines specifically aimed at forward-thinking schools in the UK and beyond. Have you checked out their latest releases? Don't miss out! Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading!
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We are going to delve into some of these mediation activities. I know it's what you've all been waiting for. And I think now for me, I've had a quick flick through the book. I've not read it in detail. I'm very sorry. When it's got the sticker on the front saying Elton award-winning book, that's when I'll read the whole thing. I've had a flick through. And there's some wonderful ones in there. Now, the first one in there, and it's absolutely brilliant and perfect for Spain. B is for bureaucracy. It's just got Spain written all over it, and I love the idea of it because, you know, a Spanish person. I remember when I got here and I went to get what at the time was my NIE, my Número Identificación Extranjero. And I remember going there with a mediator. I had somebody there who could help me and explain everything to me. And it seemed quite easy because they knew that I had to take, you know, every paper that had ever existed with me. And if I didn't, then there's no chance I'd get anywhere. But then I remember later on in life, myself being the mediator for somebody else, and they hadn't brought one of the right papers, and everything, like, excuse my language in advance, went to shit. It was just all terrible. So
they're like, well, what do you mean you don't have?
you know,
how could you possibly not have brought that?
Exactly. How have you forgotten, you know, index 4.321G? Exactly. So I think this is just perfect for, you know, particularly for the Spanish classroom, because it is like an in-joke in Spain that bureaucracy is absolutely insane here. And, you know, quite often for one document, you have to go to 18 different offices, sign 4,576 different papers, dance, and then make sure you hop out on your left leg, not your right leg, and do a Mexican wave whilst leaving. Otherwise, you have no chance of getting your documentation. So this idea is brilliant. Can you tell us about the idea?
No, Ethan, go for it.
Yeah, so basically what it is, it's like a role play where one student acts as a mediator, as you did in real life. See, this is the kind of thing, like, when you think about it, mediation is happening all the time outside of class. So why not, you know, why not bring it in? So this is based on a true story. So basically, when you go to another country, you just don't understand bureaucracy, right? It's like hard to understand bureaucracy even in your own country. And basically in this activity, you ask students to do a little bit of research about how to apply for things. Basically apply for a residency or apply for a national identity card or health insurance. And then sort of based on their research that they've done in their own language or in English, you know, wherever they find that information, and then sort of explaining that process to somebody who's sort of new to the country and is sort of doesn't have access to that information or would have a hard time finding it. That's basically the idea of the activity.
And it mentions in here something I really love about the book in general is the differentiation side of things, because not all students are the same. Now, I'm sorry to say this, teachers, we can't teach all students in exactly the same way. They're not all the same. We can't just mold them into our perfect English speaking minions, much as we try. So this idea of differentiation with this one, for example, how might you help somebody in their quest to help someone else?
Yeah, this was something that our editor actually suggested, or better, it was already in the first book in the series.
Yes.
By Jason Anderson, which is Activities for Cooperative Learning, and we really liked the idea. So it's so easy to include in your materials. Because if you think about it, so it's a moment for the teacher to reflect on, okay, I've got these 3 students who might find this challenging, so I'm going to provide them with, I don't know, a couple of websites they can use for doing more research, or some language for this other group of students. So yeah, I really liked the fact that they it's probably one of the few things that they that wasn't in our proposal, like the initial proposal, but it's definitely, yeah. It's very
No, it's great that Delta
yeah.
made space for that in the book,
And also
Yes,
they really
absolutely.
wanted, and they made space for it.
And the adaptation to a virtual class, which of course is really important. And something
Absolutely.
else I really loved about this
Absolutely.
activity in particular was, can it be done online or not? Because so often with this kind of task, we'll put the students in this situation of, here you go, you have to do this worksheet, you have to fill this out, you have to do this, you have to imagine you're talking to this person. And you've gone through this whole situation and you've spent, an hour and a half. They've done all this research when really they could have just done it online. So you've just created this whole, I like the idea that John Hughes talks about a real play. So instead of a role play, it's a real play, because, it is something that would happen in real life. So yeah, I like that you say on here, can it be done online? Because if it can be done online, then you're going to approach it very differently to if you have to go in there and convince Marta, the funcionario who's been working for 35 years in the same job, that really you don't need a bit of paper, and with a nice happy smile and a compliment on her lovely earrings, she might still just let you do it anyway.
Yeah, she's going to give you 2 years, not one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, I've got double. So yeah, that was the first one, that the B for bureaucracy really did jump out on me. And funnily enough, the second activity in the book as well, which I really loved, which I relate a lot to the work that I do with sustainability, this idea of fake news.
All right, absolutely.
I love this activity. I absolutely love it. It's something I've done with my students before, with fake news and with greenwashing as well.
We work really well for greenwashing.
It works really well with greenwashing for the next edition of this book. Just add it in there.
Yeah, no, that's. See, Ricardo should have mentioned that.
Yeah.
It's okay. It was, it's before we'd met.
So
I had greenwash news.
Consulting on the book area. See, this is what happens when you don't consult.
There you go. Second edition. I'll have a credit on there. It's fine.
Yeah.
Do we we don't have any more stuff in our book?
Yeah, I was actually
Harry,
in that. Like, I don't think there's a lot of sort of environmental stuff in there.
But
I think we mentioned deforestation in passing at some point.
But this
maybe in the suggestion.
This idea of fake news and debunking fake news, it's a skill that we all need. It's a skill that's so vital to us. So what is that kind of task? Just very briefly. I don't want you to tell us your whole book. Don't worry. I'm not going to make you sit here and just describe the whole book so nobody has to go and get it, because they really should. Whether you're teaching English or just teaching in general. So this whole idea of fake news and debunking fake news.
Yeah. So basically, it's so Ricardo was sort of describing a task earlier where somebody sort of reads something and then they sort of summarize it, or they sort of interpret it. And that's basically what students are doing. They're sort of looking at fake news, and then they're doing some research, and then in our case, sort of writing like a social media post, kind of debunking that fake news. But they could be doing sort of, they could just be explaining it to their classmates or something. They don't necessarily have to write a social media post, but that's sort of how we wrote the task. And that's basically the point, is getting students to sort of critically use their critical thinking skills. When they're looking at a piece of news and thinking about where they could find good quality information about that topic, to sort of check if it's actually true.
What people might like about this activity is, I think, the most important thing is that actually the teacher can lead the students to think about the process step by step, thinking about the source first, and then criticizing it, analyzing it, and then criticizing it. So you haven't in the worksheet, you have a pre-task activity that I like, in which there's a list of sources like YouTube. Well, can we say YouTube? I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna.
As long as you don't talk badly about it, Siri is going to be listening to us, I'm sure.
Etc. So you have different sources, like an article from this type of magazine or a video from this type of platform. And so, according to you, how trustworthy would you say that these sources are? So there is a bit of again, the students are taken through the process step by step. It's not about just these are examples of news. Which one's fake? Which one isn't? Why? It's more about again thinking critically about sources, message, and then style of the message, register. So there's a bit of everything.
We include some kind of red flags for fake news, or things for, hopefully the students will kind of discover it by looking at it. But if they don't, sort of things the teacher could sort of identify as being kind of red flags for they just don't look right,
And I really like saying I'm not going to, as I said, I'm not going to go through all of the different activities in there, but I do like how with mediation in general, it is that real life situation, looking for a flat, those kind of things, or giving instructions, receiving instructions. It's real life, and it's something that's too often missing from our textbooks, from our workbooks, and so on and so forth. We far too often look at something else, reading about the explorer who went there and did that, and it isn't about our own lives. And what I really like about mediation in general, and of course with the book, is it's real life things, and it does also have in there useful language, which with being an English book with an English language book, it's important to have that as well. So you're bringing these life situations to life, and you're providing students with the framework, with the language they're going to need to use it. And I think with mediation, it's great.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think mediations can be a way of sort of bringing the world into the classroom, and also bringing students' own experiences into the classroom. I think it often opens up that kind of possibility, for sure.
Excellent. So as I say, I'm not going to go through every single thing in the book, because people do need to check it out. But what we haven't done, which is quite strange, we've talked about mediation. We've talked about your journeys into mediation. We've said your book. Now, why don't you tell us the name of your book?
It's kind of long.
Ideas in action, activities for mediation, and I think it's building bridges in the LT classroom. So I remember going with the different one at the beginning, and Ethan saying, no, we're going to change it to building bridges. Or was it like, I can't remember, the first one was activities for mediation, bridging something. It was like something a bit more, something shorter. We were talking about, but this guy.
I like bridges.
I love bridges. I love bridges. I'll tell you what,
bridges.
I've got a great book here.
There's a nice alliteration there, building bridges.
Yeah. Oh, do you know a funny thing? I actually came to Seville because of a bridge. Oh, that's not even a joke.
Oh, no way.
I love bridges.
No
so yeah, I used to
troll or something.
I'm a bit weird. But I used to live in Brazil, and I had two classes on a Thursday, out in the sticks somewhere. And one of them was at like 9 a.m, and the next one was at 2 p.m. So I had hours and hours and hours between my classes. And luckily, there was a bookshop just over the road. So I'd go in there, and they had a really good book about bridges. And I love bridges. I think the Clifton Suspension Bridge in Bristol is probably my favourite. But anyway, I saw the Puente del Aramillo, which is a single-sided suspension bridge. And it was, in fact, the world's first single-sided suspension bridge. So this was back in 2008. And I said to myself, I think I'm going to go and live in Seville one day. And I went around. I then lived in China. I then lived in Vietnam. I then lived in Australia. And eventually, I came to Seville because of a bridge. And I'm still here.
I didn't know you've lived in so many places here. That's impressive. You're one of those TEFL teachers that actually went everywhere.
I was a backpack TEFL teacher.
I made it to the Mediterranean and never left.
I mean, why would you? Why would you leave? It's pretty special here.
Yeah,
It's pretty special.
Yeah, why go anywhere else?
I can hear my dog Estrella agreeing as well in the background there. She's saying, she's telling us that the Mediterranean is the best place to be. So, gentlemen, this has been obviously unsurprisingly lovely. It has also been educational, which is something I'm going to be honest here with Teachers Talk Radio. So this is probably about the 60th, maybe the 70th show that I've done.
Well done. Congratulations.
That's a lot. Yeah. I've spoken to a lot of different people, and it's
a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. And I love the way it flows. It's very organic, and I'm going to be honest. On a very selfish level, I've learned so much from this. It's great for my own CPD, and it's really helped my writing and my teaching as well. And I have to say, it's been very enlightening to learn a bit more about mediation. And I hope that our listeners have also got a great takeaway from our award-winning guests.
Thank you very much, Harry.
Thanks, sir. Pleasure.
So, go
on,
tell
next,
me.
ELT thing.
Yes, I'll see you at the next ELT thing, which
I'm sure we'll cross paths soon enough.
We definitely will. I'll see you in February, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Up in Segovia. So thank you so much. Yeah, exactly. And I'll see you there. I'll see you soon.
Cool.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.